What up? It's Dr. T. I just wanted to go over this article I came across, which is extremely interesting to me. It's one of the classics in obesity by William Banting. This was wrote in 1860s, 1863, December 1863. So the author William Banting was a obese gentleman who tried many things to lose weight, and so he basically just wrote about his trials and things that were effective for him. And I found this article pretty interesting, so I'm just going to go through it really quickly. And so he mentions corpulence a lot. You can just Google it, the letter on corpulence, and it'll pop up in Google. But he mentions corpulence a lot, which is basically a synonym for obesity. And he started with a very strong phrase. He says, of all the parasites that affect humanity, I do not know of, nor can I imagine any more distressing than that of obesity. And having just emerged from a very long probation in this affliction, I am desirous of circulating my humble knowledge and experience for the benefit of my fellow man, which I earnest hope it may lead to the same comfort and happiness I now feel under the extraordinary change. And it's very strong language he used, calling it a parasite. And this was in 1863. So obesity, I guess, didn't really come into become very popular to like late, probably 1980s, 1990s. So for him to use that language back then was pretty significant for me. Obesity seems to be very little understood or properly appreciated. Nothing has changed today. You know, it's still very controversial topic and poorly understood now. I may do a video later because it has gotten me interested with the recent controversy with Ariel Spears and the Lizzo. Yeah. So I don't know, but I'm just gonna go through some of the things he mentioned here. So this is what he started off with. He was 66 years old, 5 feet 5 inches. He weighed 202 pounds. And then by the end of this diet, which he specifies later in the article, he went down to 167 pounds. So something about 1 pound a week since August to, I believe, December. So that's a significant change. Uh, and then he mentioned some of the things that he was unable to do. This was a good phrase that he has here, just regarding the daily annoyances or difficulties of being obese. He says, um, anyone so afflicted is often subject to public remark, and though unconscious, he may care little about it. I am confident no man laboring under obesity can be quite insensible to the sneers and remarks of the cruel and injurious in public assemblies, public vehicles, or the ordinary street traffic, nor to the annoyance of finding no adequate space in a public assembly if he should seek amusement or need refreshment, and therefore he naturally keeps away as much as possible from places where he is likely to be made the object of the taunts and remarks of others. So this just speaks then, but also today, on some of the difficulties of being obese. In some places they've made accommodations, in others not so much. If you're considering airplanes, it's still very crowded places. Some people opt to pay more for first class rather than be stuffed in those seats. Large assemblies, crowds. If you're going to a sporting event in a large venue, there's small spaces to get around. So I think it's interesting that he details that. And he says, I cannot stoop to tie my shoe, so to speak, nor attend to the little offices humanity requires without considerable pain and difficulty. He would walk down the stairs backwards to save the jar of increased weight upon the ankle and knee joints, which he later demonstrates with the weight loss. He was able to go down the stairs normally without any difficulty. So to go into the change in his diet, so the items for which he was advised to abstain, he tried different diets before, which he details in the article, but he ends up abstaining from mostly bread, butter, milk, sugar, beer, and potatoes, which have been the main elements, he says, of his existence, or at all events they had for many years been adopted freely. Okay. So he found an advisor who advised him to refrain from these foods containing starch and saccharine matter, tending to create fat and should be avoided altogether. So this is, I mean, way back then, and we've seen diets similar to this. I would say the paleo diet is kind of close to this. And then if you want to take it a step further in a more extreme manner, you got the Dr. Sebi diet. So we've seen variations of a type of diet like this, but this is kind of, from what I've been able to see, this is like the first article demonstrating like eliminate these types of foods, you'll lose weight, like the first weight loss fad, pretty much. So he demonstrates what he would eat for breakfast. So for breakfast, he would take 4 or 5 ounces of beef, mutton. I gotta look up mutton. I don't even know what mutton is. I'm not eating it though. Kidneys, broiled fish, bacon, or cold meat of any kind except pork. A large cup of tea without milk or sugar, and he demonstrates before he would eat a lot of milk. A little biscuit or 1 ounce of dry toast. And for dinner, he would have 5 or 6 ounces of any fish except salmon, any meat except pork, any vegetable except potato, 1 ounce of dry toast, fruit out of a pudding, any kind of poultry or game, and 2 or 3 glasses of good claret, sherry, or champagne. My man. But he couldn't drink port or beer. I just found it interesting just what the typical breakfast consisted of back then. 4 or 5 ounces of beef, which would be unusual for us to eat in breakfast. There was no mention of like eggs or um, anything like that. And then for tea, I also like how it's just for tea as a given. It's not if you have tea, it's just everyone has tea. For tea, he had 2 or 3 ounces of fruit, a rusk or two. I got to look up what a rusk is. I don't know. A cup of tea without milk or sugar. And then for supper, you'd have the 3 or 4 ounces of meat or fish with a glass or two of claret, if I'm saying that right. And then a nightcap. You got to have a nightcap if required. It's always required. And a tumbler of grog. I don't know what grog is, but I got to get some grog. And then gin, whiskey, or brandy without sugar. All right. Gives them a great night's rest. You got to get that grog. When I have patients coming in with insomnia, I'm going to tell them, get you a tumbler of grog. Gives you an excellent night's rest with 6 to 8 hours of sound sleep. All right. And then, so instead of butter, so what you do without the butter, if the toast is too dry, you put on a little bit of rusk. Sorry, excuse me. If the toast is too dry, you can put about a tablespoon of some alcohol on it to soften it. You know what I mean? So basically, he was just escaping the starchy or saccharine matter, which we've heard multiple times, but is very difficult to give up. And then in the morning, even, he liked his alcohol, it seems like. He calls it a spoonful of a special corrective cordial, which may be called the balm of life in a wine glass of water. A cordial, I believe, is like an alcoholic drink. And he states that it's seemed to carry away all the dregs left in the stomach after digestion. So that was that. And then I just like this quote where he says, experience has taught me to believe that these human beings are the most insidious enemies man with a tendency to corpulence in advanced life can possess, though eminently friendly to youth. What he refers to in human beings, he talked about earlier in the article. He basically compared this to horses who thrive off of hay, having the occasional bean and being okay. However, if you were only to give horses only beans to eat, they would not thrive. So that's so he's calling them human beings in the sense of if you give men a lot of high starch foods, then they won't thrive. And then he goes on to say when he says, though eminently friendly to youth, these are a little bit more tolerable when you're young. You know, everyone knows when you're young, you pretty much eat whatever, you burn it off, you don't tend to gain as much weight. However, that takes a toll on you as you get older. Da, da, da. And then he goes on to say that he found benefit within the short period of a few months while on this diet. His former diet, he ate a lot of bread, so much bread, good amount of beer, buttered toast, sugar, milk, all that stuff, which he gave up. Um, and he says, it certainly appears to me that my present dietary table is far superior to the former, more luxurious and liberal, independent of its blessed effects. But when it is proved to be more healthful, comparisons are simply ridiculous. So, yes, the beer and butter bread and things were more enjoyable to the palate, but not more beneficial to his health. Okay. And so once again, he describes it in quite a bit of disdain. He says, with the crying evil of obesity, that dreadful, tormenting parasite on health and comfort, their fellow man might not descend into early premature graves, as I believe many do, from what is termed apoplexy, and certainly would not, during their sojourn on earth, endure so much bodily and consequently mental infirmity. So it's interesting that he noticed change not only in his physical attributes, weight, but also in his energy, quality of sleep, and mental fortitude. And then he says, so once again, he states that corpulence or obesity, though given no actual pain, as it appears to me, must naturally press with undue violence upon the bodily viscera. So we know that we're seeing a lot more fatty liver in association with obese patients. You know, we've come to realize how much of a toll being obese takes on the liver just because of the congestion and pressure that the excess fat or our weight places on the liver. He says, I have not felt so well as now for the last 20 years. He comes down the stairs forward naturally versus previously he would go down backwards. It sounds like he had an umbilical hernia, which was relieved. And yeah, so he goes on just to say how grateful he is for whoever it was who told him about the diet and how those results helped him with significant weight loss. Uh, he has given up a truss almost entirely. I don't know what a truss is. I'm assuming maybe like a girdle of sorts or something like that, but he no longer has to use that. Uh, And then so one of the most things that's very important, we see people lose weight, not being able to keep it off a lot, whether that's a certain diet, whether that's with bariatric surgery, things like that. He was able to say that he remained at the same standard of bulk and weight for several weeks after the 26th of August, which I attained the happy natural medium, since which time I have varied in weight from 2 to 3 pounds, more or less. Okay. And he then goes on to say that over time, yes, his diet had become more relaxed. Occasionally, he would eat kind of the bread, beer, not so much beer, but breads occasionally. But that would be a rare exception and not something that he did daily. And then, so we have this chart, which is very interesting. I mean, probably considered maybe the at least the first replica of a BMI that I have seen. So here it is, 5'1", should be 8 stone. So we're still going back to stone, or 120 pounds here. So I'm about 5'8", maybe 5'9", if you give me that. So I should be 155. Definitely not that. I'm about 170 something, almost 180 now. So boom, boom, boom. I should not hesitate to partake of a fattening dietary occasionally to preserve that happy standard. You know, you need that happy food. Um, but if I choose to spend a day, I like this quote where he says, you know, occasionally he'll eat something bad, but he says, if I choose to spend a day or two with Dives or Divas, so to speak, I must not forget to devote the next to Lazarus. Uh, and so what is interesting now, and kind of contrary to what we've kind of been told now, where that calories are king, he opposes that and says that the quantity of the diet may be safely left to the natural appetite, and that it is the quality only which is essential to abate and cure corpulence. Um, and then he got a quote from, he told his diet to someone else who was obese, and he says, I've heard a graphic remark by a corpulent man, which may not be inappropriately stated here, that big houses were not formed with scanty materials. This, however, is a poor excuse for self-indulgence in improper food or for not consulting medical authority. Uh, Yeah, so those are the main, I mean, the whole article is great if you have the time. It's just 11 pages, just read it. But I just found it very interesting. And in general, I think there's a lot of truths in things that have basically proven itself over time. And this diet, I think, has been a staple in a lot of different diets, like I mentioned, paleo. So it's kind of inspired me myself to go ahead and try it out. And it's not so difficult. Basically, just cutting down on the breads, buttermilk, sugar is probably going to be the most hard for me. And down the beer and potatoes, and that leaves you with a lot of options, especially today. So yeah, I'll give it a shot. I'll let you know how it goes. But I thought it was interesting. I'll probably do some more videos on obesity as well.